Okay. Welcome to the 15th episode of TalentHut TESOL Academy podcast. Today, AI is already in our classrooms, whether we want it or not. The real question is, what do we do with it? Our today's guest, Robert Martinez, has spent decades in education, working with teachers, exams, and digital innovation across international contexts. He's deeply involved in team development and assessment, with a strong focus on creativity and technology in language education. Today, we're talking about AI in English teaching and whether this shift is going to help us or hurt us. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for this invitation and the opportunity to share with all those people listening to us now.
Great. So we begin with the questions. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. You worked in English teaching field for a long time. When did AI first start to feel real to you as a teacher?
That's a really good question. I think that for me, it really started to feel real when it became a two-way street, when there was that iteration and it started responding to teachers and learners. More specifically, I think is towards the end of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, because I started exploring it to see what it could do, and I realized that it was that I could chat actually to it. And also it started producing usable lesson ideas and feedback drafts and exam style tasks in seconds. What really got my attention was that, yes, some of the output was not correct. Some things we learn later, we learned that there are hallucinations, that it can make up information, that some information is not accurate 100%. But the idea was that I was able to have a conversation with the AI with a very specific idea for a lesson plan, for example, or for materials. I really enjoy creating materials so that I can have my students, my very specific group of students in mind, because very often I see that course books they're great. They serve as a roadmap, right? But very often they're not very inclusive. They're not very representative of my own students. They're becoming more aware. I think publishers are becoming more aware of the need for course books to be more relevant and more localized. Because I'm sure that if you know about language teaching in general, most of the course books are for people in the West. So all the pictures
Totally
are
agree.
people that are white. Yeah, all the people are white, all the people are able, or the people are well off, they have means, they have resources. And very often when you work in different contexts, I've worked in 10 different countries over 31 years, and you get to see when you open the book, and although the content and the activities are good, you see that students, because we know the students, teachers, we know the students and the context, we know that that's not going to be very appealing. So for me, AI was like, oh my God, this is going to allow me to differentiate and localize my materials, taking an idea, not copying it. This is very, very important, because there's a lot of talk about plagiarism, and I think we have to be very careful, because not everything is plagiarism. So as long as I take the idea and I use it as inspiration, is like, okay, they're presenting that context there. I know my students cannot relate to that. I'm going to think about something similar that my students can relate to. So for me, that's when AI started to feel real. I could actually not reinvent the wheel. I didn't start creating lesson plans or materials for all the course books and all my classes. That's impossible. But I was able to do it in less time, a lot less time. I also realized that I became more critical, because I also saw that a lot of people were going like, oh, this is wonderful, this is the lesson plan, and then run to the classroom with the lesson plan to realize that there were mistakes in it. So for me was different. Maybe because of my, I like studying a lot. I have 3 full MAs. I have 3 postgraduate diplomas, hundreds of other courses. Maybe because of that strong academic background, I wasn't, how can I say it? I wasn't surprised by the mistakes, and I was used to having to read and check things when you're looking to into research, into literature, to write a paper. You know that you have to look for that. You need to think about your own ideas. You need to try and find connections. So because I had that strong academic background, I think that it was less easy for me as a teacher as well to just take things as they came out, because that's what I saw many teachers doing. I mean, it was, taking raptured by the new tool and then just taking that, this is wonderful, let me use it. And then without really thinking about checking whether it was right or wrong or correct, or whether it was really appropriate for the students and things like that. So
You
that's
didn't
when I
follow it
really,
blindly.
absolutely, absolutely. And we're probably going to be mentioning this again and again
Yeah.
throughout the chat when you ask me more questions. But I think that that's when it started to feel real. I could start localizing. I could start having that conversation and learning from that conversation. So I think that that's so exciting for me as a teacher, that my own personal professional development doesn't stop. It just continues, because very often I would ask a question, it's like, explain this to me as if I was a 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, that's right. And then having those moments when you realize that you know the content, but that there are different perspectives, that you are revisiting it. So you are consolidating your own knowledge. And I think that that is a wonderful opportunity.
Amazing. So, based on whatever you just mentioned, do you see AI more as a support for teachers or a threat?
Oh, okay, that's a wonderful question, because I think it's the same thing as with calculators. Remember when calculators came along? So is it, students are going to start using calculators, and they're going to stop making all the mental math, right? So does that mean that they cannot use calculators to make operations and functions and add and subtract? No, people still use calculators. So I don't think it's the tool. I think it's how we use the tool. Same thing happened with interactive whiteboards when they came along around like early 2000s with IWBs, and it was very flashy, and people started using everything was the IWB. And I think that the problem is that as with every cycle that we see with technology, we need to be mindful of the fact that it's not the bells and the whistles, is the how we pedagogically make sound decisions. Why am I using this tool at this time? How is this tool really helping me as a teacher and my learners learn? If it is just to keep them busy, then it's probably not very good. If it is just to make, it's not entertainment. And I think that's one of the big problems. With more technology, I think we tend to think that we are in the classroom to entertain, to edutain students. And I think that's the problem. For me, it's very clear. AI supports learning and teaching, but we teachers inspire it. And this has become kind of like my slogan at every conference that I speak. Last year, I spoke at 25 different conferences, and AI supports teaching and learning, but we inspire it. So for me, it's not a threat. I think, as with anything, AI will become a threat for those teachers who don't catch up, for those teachers who ignore it, for those teachers who don't like it or don't want to upgrade their own learning, because it is when the time comes and you apply for a job, for example, and I can see, I also recruit teachers in my context. And so if I see someone who has like the last thing they did in their professional development was maybe their teaching qualification 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, I want to see, as a teacher, I strongly believe in continuing professional development. And that's why I continue to study and have a million qualifications, not because of the qualification, but because as a teacher, I think that I owe it to myself to keep up with the times, to keep up with education, with pedagogy, with technology, with what's happening, to be able to provide my peers and my students with sound decisions. I want to feel confident enough to make those decisions for the benefit of my students. And in that process, the joy is that you keep on learning. So I'm not going through the motions. I'm not doing what I learned 20 years ago. That learning has evolved. And I think that that's what happens. AI, as any other tool, will become a threat to those who don't upgrade themselves. Those who, I'm not saying that we all need to get PhDs in AI, but we do need to become AI literate, especially in education. Just as with, for example, when IWBs came out, if on your CV you have, oh, I've done several workshops or mini courses on how to use IWBs, and then a recruiter has 2 CVs or more, and you're the one with that expertise, you're probably going to get that job. So I think that that is how AI is more a support than a threat. But obviously, there's 2 sides to that coin.
Definitely. I think maybe new teachers would be affected by using AI a lot more than those who began a few years ago, at least, because when they started teaching, AI was already a part of it, and maybe they do not go through like finding the things that we started at the beginning. Maybe they
That's
would
right.
be more affected.
Absolutely. Yes. It's implementation, right? So profession
Yes.
isn't under threat, but poor implementation is not just using the AI tool for the sake of it, or having students. Even that is what really scares me. When teachers start asking students to use an AI tool without thinking about age of consent, without thinking about local regulations, national or transnational regulations, without thinking about privacy, ethical and responsible use, that's scary. That is something that we really need to be very careful as educators, because we need to, as teachers, we're responsible for the safety of our students, especially if they're minors, especially if they're minors.
Okay. So from what you've seen, what can AI do well in education, and what it can't do at all?
So that's a really exciting question, because I think that AI is excellent at drafting, at modeling, at rephrasing, at generating examples, at supporting differentiation. For example, very often I want to create something and I don't know where to start. I use AI to get me started, to as a kickstart. I'm calling this lesson. I've used this topic in the past and I've used these exercises, but I think this group is like this, they like this, they don't like that. Make 3, 5 suggestions of how I can give it a twist to that lesson, to this material, or to this idea. And I think that that is what AI can do really, really well. I use it all the time, and I think it is very important that as a teacher, we are transparent. I also tell students how I used it, where I used it, and if I'm using it for example, a presentation, or I have an AI statement for transparency. And in my materials, I include it on purpose, and I make a point for the students and the teachers whenever I'm doing teacher training, for them to see that I want everyone to be aware of the fact that there's an AI statement, how I used it, what AI tools I used, and how I use them, because this makes it transparent for everyone. It's okay to use it. So AI is excellent at doing all those things. I think it is great at doing that. It's not very good at understanding learners, because it cannot think on its own, right? And it cannot understand students' emotions or motivations. It cannot understand cultural context, and bias is a huge topic. If, for example, something I realized very early on was that if you ask for something, some of the answers would be biased. It would be directed. For example, if you asked to create a dialogue between 2 managers, they would always be men.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I created an image of the workplace, it was always mainly men as managers and women as secretaries, and they were all white. So bias is in the large language models, simply because it's not wrong. It's just that because the large language model collects information from a Western culture, then those biases are innate in that large language model. I have a YouTube channel for teachers called Learning Together with Robert. And I share tips on AI use. I share tips on classroom management, language assessment. And one, I have a series on AI prompts, because we can change the narrative. We can actually, when creating materials, when creating visuals, our prompts can change that narrative. For example, when I create materials, I make sure that I say, in my picture, I can see students from different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, different cultures, wearing different clothes, and so that they are represented there. I can see someone in a wheelchair. I have a disability myself, so very often I don't feel represented in any of the materials. So I want to make sure that those materials are representing, or that students feel represented. And I think that AI gives us that possibility. But again, AI supports teaching, but we inspire it. And by that, I mean that it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility as teachers to make sure that what AI cannot do, we make it do, because we're in charge. There's human oversight in there. And it is our responsibility for learning decisions. AI cannot make decisions. So it is always it always sits with the teacher. And this distinction is very clear in research-based discussions from organizations like the UNESCO. So we need to keep on learning. I think teaching is exciting because we are the first learner in line. We are the ones learning constantly and taking that learning back to the classroom.
Exactly. And your explanation was so complete. Honestly, I've never thought about it in that way. And now that you mentioned it, I totally agree. And I believe that, like, being able to write a correct prompt would definitely be helpful along the way. And the things that you just mentioned about people with disabilities and them feeling being counted, it really is important. And I hope that day comes that, like, we don't need to make any efforts and it just comes along the way of everything that is being prepared for us as tools or
That's right.
anything.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for mentioning it, by the way. Okay, so well, you work a lot with exams and assessments. How do you think AI is affecting testing and, like, the fairness in it?
Yes, I think AI is forcing assessment to evolve because, for example, I have students who have, for example, I'm in English language teaching, therefore there are lots of students who are preparing for exams, high stakes exams like University of Cambridge exams like Cambridge B2 First or C1 Advanced or C2 Proficiency, because they want to go and study at a university or get a visa to immigrate somewhere. And therefore they are under a lot of pressure. And I think I've had students who are, for example, at B2, this happened last year, at B2 level, who basically wrote an essay by hand that was clearly at C2 level. How can I know that? Because being an examiner myself, because being in language teaching for 31 years, you know exactly your students' level and you know your students especially. So when I read it, I just read the first paragraph of these three boys' essays, and immediately I was like, okay, this they're using language that is beyond their capacity. We haven't learned this. They're using clipped sentences. They're using really polished grammar. The syntax is perfect. The vocabulary is C2 level, is proficiency level. So I confronted them and I said, okay, so boys, you wrote excellent essays. You are at B2 level. You're preparing to take the Cambridge B2 exam. But with this kind of writing, you could do basically the C2 exam. I'm very intrigued by how you wrote it, because I've seen your previous essays and they're nowhere near this quality. And also, writing usually goes hand in hand with vocabulary, with speaking. Obviously, in writing, we have more time to think about what we're going to say and how we're going to say it. However, it's very rare to find someone who has a very polished writing skills and yet their speaking is 2 or 3 bands below that level. It's very rare. Those are called jagged profiles in language assessment. And whenever they come up, you go and study them and you go and check, how is this happening, right? This is typical, for example, of people who and just to give an example and people understand, those who are listening, if someone has learned English through everyday use in I don't know, living in Australia, in the US, in Canada, but they don't write, and their speaking is going to be very, very good with mistakes, but very, very good. Their writing is going to be very, very poor. Or vice versa, people who have focused on learning all the grammar, all the vocabulary, all the writing, but then when they have to speak, they can't put the two together. So basically, what happened was I confronted them and I said, so have you used AI? No, we haven't. And I said, okay, no worries. So tomorrow you're going to write the same essay, but you're going to write it live in class with me. If the results are the same, then I will be asking the director to move you up to 2 levels, because obviously this is not good enough for you. You're too good for this level. They didn't say anything. I said, are you 100% sure? Because I knew, but I didn't want to make it confrontational. I wanted to teach them a lesson that they would remember in a nice way. I think that in school settings, very often there's too much confrontation and too much drama when it can be avoided. So the next lesson came, they wrote it. Not obviously the results were disastrous. I called their parents, I informed them in a nice way. I said, listen, this is the situation, this is what I did, this is what happened, these are going to be the consequences. They basically plagiarized because they didn't even adapt it. They just asked AI to write the essay. They copied it by hand to make people think, and that's the wrong part because there's intention there. Parents were fully on board. They got a 0 for their writing and they understood the lesson. So
they didn't even make any changes in their writing.
No, it was just perfect. It was just a perfect essay. Yes, absolutely. So the intention. So in the end, when I confronted them and I said, this is what you produce, this is what you produce live, it's 2 different things. This is your last chance to admit that you use AI. Well, yes, but just to get ideas. I said, no, this is not just ideas. This is not your writing. If it was just ideas, the quality would be 90% the same. So in the end, they admitted it. The 15-year-old boys, in the end, they admitted it, and I think they learned a lesson. So I think AI is affecting testing and fairness because very often we hear, no, students should be using it because we're going to use Turnitin, we're going to use an AI detector. This has been going on forever at universities. My first MA was in 2012, and then the next one, 2016, the last one last year. In the meantime, I did other postgraduate diplomas, and it's always the same. Universities, we're already checking that we're not plagiarizing and using software. However, it's not a matter of saying, no, you cannot use it. It's a matter of saying, this is a tool that you can use. This is how you can use it, maybe for ideas, for brainstorming, for outlining. If you use it, you need to state clearly. Many universities are doing it now. My last MA, there was that clause. We need to have an AI statement where we used AI, add a reference, say exactly what the information AI produced and how we used it into for example, our dissertation or our paper or whatever it was that we were writing. So it's not going against it, it's making sure that it is being used properly. Now, for testing and fairness, I think that it would be a good idea to go back to the past when exams were live. So you know that you have to write the exam by hand and you need to do it live. Or interrogations when you ask students. Now, this is really useful because the problem with cognitive offloading, and this means when I ask AI to do something, I copied it, I submitted it, therefore that mental process of understanding, of asking questions or finding and making connections is not there. So if you ask me, I'm not going to be able to tell you about what I submitted in writing because I just asked the question. My understanding and my knowledge of that topic is going to be very superficial because I cognitively offloaded it onto the AI, didn't even study it, didn't even understand it, and I won't be able to tell you in detail what happens. For example, with doctoral studies, you have a viva, right? Which is your last oral examination where a panel of doctors of other PhD or Doctor of Education degree holders ask you questions about your research. And you know your research because you had to read it, you had to make the connections. AI can help us. But if we, in assessment, if we don't do the work, we're not going to be able to do it. So I think that it is evolving. It's forcing assessment to evolve. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If anything, it exposes our reliance on product-based assessment and pushes us towards process, supervision, and triangulation, I think.
Okay, cool. So some people say AI makes students lazy, but others say it like makes them more independent. Where do you stand?
Right. So I would say that neither, because it's not the AI again, and this connects to what we've been discussing and what we've been saying. It's not AI, is the approach. So I agree, it can make students and teachers or any users very, very lazy. If all I'm doing is saying, ChatGPT, I need to write this letter, please give draft. Thank you. I copied it, I pasted it, I changed the topic, I changed the name, I changed the date, briefly read it and send it. Yes, that's going to turn me into a lazy person, over relying on the AI tool because I'm missing a learning opportunity. And that's where I think the key is to mastering AI. We can use it. We can either use it to become very lazy and do everything for me. I'm a spoiled rich person with a maid, and the maid and the servants do everything for me, but I have no clue what's going on, right? I only get the results. Or I can ask for that draft email and then read it and go like, oh, that's interesting. I would have said it in a different way, but this is good. I think it's clear. Now I want to include this. How can I include it? Da, 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 da. Okay. Oh, okay. So I'm learning. That iteration is helping me become more critical, improve my own writing skills, right? And learn new things. And there are lots of things that we can do with that. So does it make students lazy or more independent? I wouldn't say students. I would change the word users because teachers are included. And if anything, we teachers can make students lazy if we're not approaching it correctly ourselves for our own learning. I said it at the beginning. Teachers, we are the first learners in the line, right? And again, AI supports learning, but we inspire it. So it's the approach that matters.
Okay, cool. Well, I think you've already mentioned in your explanation, but just maybe as a short mentioning, do you think that students should be allowed to use AI freely, or do they need clear limitation?
That's an excellent question. I'm doing an AI strategic integration fellowship with Skill in Future, and their work is absolutely fantastic. It's really hard work, but it is an eye opener. And I think that as educators, especially, and anyone in leadership, we really need to ensure that it is not a battle against don't use it. No, I think that is neither free use or clear limits. I think the key is AI literacy. So learning the basics, but not with a workshop, with a conference, not with this is how you're going to use it and forget, and these are the rules, and then that's it. We need to ensure that we're modeling and helping students become AI literate so that they see when it is okay to use it, why it is okay to use it, how AI is appropriate. It is human, is the human part that I see missing very often. And that is key, is human oversight is essential because it is a tool. It's probably the best tool ever, but it's still a tool and it is how we use it. This is very similar to how when we handle calculators or the internet, as I mentioned before. So ethical and age appropriate use frameworks recommended by educational bodies like OECD are a solid reference point here. And Skill in Future and the AI Strategic Integration Fellowship that they have provides a wonderful roadmap for anyone. It's not just for companies or for educational institutions, it's for anyone using AI now, especially in education. It's very important that we do it with them. We create AI classroom contracts. We all define it. It's not imposing the rules to the students. It's not a top-down approach. It's a collaborative approach that works.
Okay. And well, it also happens to teachers when they start using AI and they may say, like, it's not for this classroom as well. Like, it would be like it's not working for the classroom that they're managing, or it doesn't go the way that they planned it. So, as the same as like you mentioned, like the students need to learn using it. Like, we are not about to give them I don't know, speech through use it or not using it, but help them through the way that they can use it. I believe it is the
Mm.
same for teachers. So, has it ever happened to you that you started using AI tool and you were like, it's not working for that classroom?
That's a really interesting question. Not really. I think that is likely to happen if we start with the tool and rather than with pedagogy. And it's so important because I've seen that happening. Like, oh, this didn't work. Yes, but did you explore the tool yourself first? Did you check the kind of data it collects from the students or from you? Did you check how it enhances your lesson? Did you use it for a particular lesson? Because I think the problem is when you see a tool and you go like, oh, that's so cool, and I bring it into the classroom and okay, let's start using it. I think we need to go back first. There has to be some backward design. We need to start with the learning outcomes, not with the tool. So in my lesson today, by the end of this lesson, the students are going to be exposed to the present simple form for I and we, and in the context of routines, for example. And then when I have my clear learning outcomes and a clear idea of what I want my students to achieve, and then I can think of AI tools, explore AI tools that I may be aware of, that someone has shared, that you've seen on a workshop or that you've seen on the internet, and then see the question is, how is that tool enhancing the learning of the students? How is that tool allowing them to take that language and use it in such a way that is different from just using pen and paper or just talking to each other? Are they collaborating? Are they just interacting? Is it a one-way street? Are they just giving answers, or are they being given answers? So I don't think it is. In my experience, it's probably it hasn't happened because I've always started being a teacher educator and so interested in how we learn and how we teach. And that order is deliberate. How we learn should come first. As a teacher, I consider myself a learner first. If I don't know how to learn and how learning happens, how memory works, how we learn, how am I going to lead students to learn and be a teacher? And I think very often the problem is that we think teaching is just passing on information, and that is not the case.
Yeah,
So
totally.
we should always start with the pedagogy first.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What skills do you think that teachers now need more that they didn't need maybe like 10 years ago?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I would say definitely first AI literacy, like what is AI, how does it work, the basics. I'm not saying that you need to get an MA or a PhD in AI, no. But as teachers, especially for the language classroom, we need to have a basic, hopefully, a, a good understanding of what AI is, what it does, how it works, and then definitely prompt literacy, because we have the power to change the narrative when we create context, when we create materials, when we localize our materials, and also to ensure that there are no bias in the output. So prompt literacy, basic AI literacy, critical evaluation, absolutely. I think that critical evaluation of AI output is, if not the most needed skill right now, because of that over reliance on AI. Oh, it's going to do it. It's true. We can save a lot of time. I'm a content creator. I have a YouTube channel that I mentioned before, Learning Together with Robert on YouTube. I'm active, very active on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, sharing tips and ideas for all things related to teaching. So I know, and I can guarantee that AI helps me create a lot more content in half the time, but that other half the time I use to check that it is appropriate. And also while checking, it helps me learn and relearn and revisit and consolidate what I know. And so that makes me feel a lot more confident every day, because I'm not delegating my learning to the AI tool. The example that I gave before, super rich person with 10 maids or servants, and they're all doing the work for me. No, I'm still doing the work. I didn't have the time. The other half the time, I'm using it to double check, and that double checking helps me keep on being critical, consolidating, and keeping learning. And the third thing would be ethical decision making about data, bias, and responsibility. We really need to be ethical, and we need to model it. And for this, the AI Strategic Integration Fellowship has taught me a lot, and I'm so grateful for that. But I think we need to really make sure that we are still keeping an eye on prompt literacy, critical evaluation, and ethical decision making.
Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying the conversation, but honestly, due to lack of time, I need to move on to the last question.
Mm-hmm.
So, if AI disappeared tomorrow, what would teachers suddenly realize they still need to do properly?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I think it depends on the teacher, because those teachers that have been critical all along, that they have been thinking about their students locally, about their resources, about differentiation, about universal design for learning, those teachers who have been making decisions ethically, I'm sure that those teachers have come to use AI in the same way, right? So if it disappeared tomorrow, it would probably affect especially those teachers who are cognitively offloading and delegating all their tasks, or 80 or 90% of the tasks, to AI. They're going to struggle. They're not going to fail, but I'm sure that they would struggle going back to creating materials themselves, to thinking about designing their own lessons themselves, to thinking about adaptation and differentiation themselves, because all those schema in their brains were basically frozen when they started using AI and delegating all that brain power to AI. So I think that if AI disappeared tomorrow, then those teachers would basically be the ones really feeling it. We still would need to design meaningful tasks, give human feedback, manage classrooms, motivate learners, and make fair assessment decisions, because AI hasn't replaced any core teaching skill. Those core teaching skills are still with us and will remain with us. So I think that that's what we need to bear in mind. AI supports teaching, but we inspire it.
Amazing. Thank you. Any last words? Anything that you'd like to mention?
No, I would just say to every teacher out there, don't be scared of AI. It's just a tool. Start with small steps. Don't think about everything, critique everything. Don't take things for granted. Don't accept everything AI gives you. That's going to help you train your brain even further and keep being critical. Also, that we are responsible. The law doesn't admit ignorance. We are responsible ultimately. And responsibility sits with adults, not the learners. So, institutions, policymakers, and educators, we're all part of the equation, basically. So, be curious, keep that curiosity at the forefront so that we can keep on learning.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your honest insights. It was a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being a part of this conversation. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, Learning Together with Robert.
Okay,
Bye bye.
sure. Amazing. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. You too.